The phone at 515 O Studios blasted through the silence at exactly 2:47 a.m. on a Tuesday in early March 1981. Eddie Van Halen, half asleep and expecting another late-night call from a drunk buddy at the whiskey, picked up without thinking. But the moment he heard that smoky, unmistakable voice on the other end, Stevie Nicks, everything changed. She sounded nervous, almost unsure, as she asked if he could meet her the next afternoon at Sunset Sound Studios. No reason, no small talk, just that mysterious request. That single phone call would kick off one of rock's most secretive and scandal-filled stories, a mystery that stayed hidden for nearly 40 years. What went down in that studio over the next 6 hours would spark wild rumors of a lost ghost recording, almost tear Fleetwood Mac apart, and shake Eddie's marriage to Valerie Bertinelli to its core. The truth stayed buried until Stevie Nicks accidentally slipped up during a 2019 radio interview, and even then, she quickly tried to take it back. But the damage was done, and the whispers began again. Back in early '81, Eddie was untouchable. Fair warning had just dropped, and critics were losing their minds over it. Van Halen was selling out arenas across the country, and his marriage to TV star Valerie Bertinelli made them rock's golden couple. But behind the fame and flash, Eddie was restless. The pressure to top Women and Children First was eating him alive, and his creative clashes with David Lee Roth were getting ugly. He'd spend endless nights locked away in his home studio, chasing new sounds that didn't fit the Van Halen mold, searching for something raw and real that he couldn't quite explain. So when Stevie called that early morning, it felt like fate. She wasn't just offering a recording session. She was handing him a way out. No band drama, no expectations, no spotlight, just music. Stevie herself was going through her own storm. Her debut solo album, Belladonna, was almost done, and her toxic relationship with Lindsey Buckingham had hit rock bottom. They barely spoke unless lawyers were involved. Fleetwood Mac's inner chaos during the Tusk era had exploded into full-blown warfare, and Stevie was determined to prove she could rise on her own. She wanted something louder, edgier, the kind of raw energy she heard in Van Halen's riffs, miles away from the dreamy California sound she was known for. But there was a problem. Lindsey was watching her every move. He knew if her solo career took off, the balance of power in Fleetwood Mac would shift for good. So Stevie kept her plans quiet. Meeting Eddie in secret was risky, and that was exactly what made it thrilling. The secret session was locked in for 3 p.m. on March 18, 1981, at Sunset Sound Studios, just blocks from where Van Halen used to grind out club gigs before fame hit. Stevie booked Studio 2 under a fake name, told the engineer it was just demo work, and paid in cash to keep everything off the books. Eddie showed up early, rolling into the underground garage in his sleek black '79 Porsche 911. No way he was risking being spotted by photographers on the street. When he finally stepped into the control room, he froze for a second. There was Stevie, but not the Stevie the world knew. No flowing shawls, no glittering scarves, just jeans and a plain black sweater, her hair pulled back, her eyes sharp and serious. Something big was about to happen that night, and neither of them had any idea just how far it would go. Her hair was pulled back tight, her usual confidence nowhere to be found. She looked nervous, almost fragile. Eddie would later tell a close friend he'd never seen Stevie Nicks like that before, and something in him instantly kicked into protect mode. Stevie told him she had a song idea, something darker, heavier, more dangerous than anything she'd ever dared to do with Fleetwood Mac. She needed someone who could tap into pure, unfiltered power, but still keep the melody alive. Someone who wouldn't sand down the edges like Lindsey always did. But there was one thing Stevie didn't mention in that first hour, and that secret would twist everything that followed. The song she wanted to record was called The Dealer, a haunting, metaphorical track about addiction, temptation, and control. drawn straight from what she'd lived through, watching friends spiral out on cocaine in the late 70s. The lyrics were raw, filled with lines about white lines and chemical lovers, the kind of stuff that would never make it past Fleetwood Mac's squeaky clean public image. Stevie wanted something that sounded dangerous, a guitar tone that could capture both the rush and the fear of losing control. Eddie got it right away. No questions, no hesitation. He grabbed his custom Frankenstrat, the one splashed in his trademark red, white, and black stripes, and plugged in. The moment he struck those first notes, the air in the studio changed. Behind the console was Marcus Chen, a young engineer who'd worked with everyone from Quincy Jones to the Ramones. And even he said later that the chemistry between Stevie and Eddie was almost supernatural. Eddie unleashed a riff that didn't sound like Van Halen at all. It was darker, heavier, dripping with blues and a slow burn menace that sent chills down your spine. Stevie's voice soared over it, cracked and fiery like she was purging her soul right there on the mic. By 5 p.m., they had the skeleton of the track. By 6:30, they were locked in, tracking what might have been the only full take of The Dealer ever recorded. Neither of them noticed the white Mercedes pulling up quietly behind the building. Lindsey Buckingham had arrived. He was supposed to be in San Francisco that week, mixing tracks for his own solo project. But at the last minute, he bailed. Something didn't feel right. When he called Stevie's assistant asking where she was, the shaky answer, "She's just doing some writing at home," gave him everything he needed to know. Stevie never wrote at home. She only created in studios, on buses, anywhere but that old house they used to share. Lindsey started calling every studio in town, one by one, until a receptionist at Sunset Sound slipped up and confirmed that a private session in Studio 2 was still going on. That was all he needed. He jumped in his car and tore across the city. When he got there, security tried to stop him at the front desk, but this was Lindsey Buckingham, a man who practically lived at Sunset Sound. He knew every hallway, every side door, every shadowed stairway that led straight into a control room. At 7:15 p.m., Eddie was right in the middle of a blistering guitar solo when the studio door slammed open. Lindsey Buckingham walked in, and the whole room froze. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Stevie's face went white as paper. Marcus Chen later said he honestly thought someone might not make it out alive. But Lindsey didn't yell. That would have been easier. Instead, he just stood there in the doorway, silent, staring at Stevie with a look of betrayal so deep that Eddie actually stopped mid-note. The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating, like the air itself was holding its breath. He pointed right at Eddie and dropped a line that would burn into Eddie's memory forever. "You think he's going to save you from yourself? He's more of a mess than you are." Eddie didn't even try to respond. He knew this wasn't really about him. He'd already heard plenty from friends about how toxic things were between Lindsey and Stevie. This was years of pent-up chaos finally snapping. The blow-up that followed nearly tore Fleetwood Mac apart before their biggest album even hit the shelves. Lindsey demanded to know what they were recording. Stevie refused to tell him, flat out. That only pushed Lindsey harder. He threatened to call Mick Fleetwood and Christine McVie, turning it into a full-on band crisis. He was ready to make Stevie's solo session look like a betrayal of everything they'd built together. But Stevie didn't back down for a second. She fired right back, saying Lindsey had been threatening to leave the band for years. She said he'd been cutting down her songwriting ever since Rumors. She was tired of asking for anyone's permission to be an artist. The whole room exploded with shouting. It wasn't just an argument anymore. It was war. Eddie stood frozen, his Frankenstrat still hanging around his neck, watching what felt like a marriage falling apart right in front of him. Behind the console, Marcus Chen quietly started erasing the multi-track tape like he already knew this session had turned into evidence for a battle way bigger than any song. Then Lindsey made his threat, cold and final. If Stevie released any music with Eddie Van Halen, he'd quit Fleetwood Mac on the spot. And not quietly, either. He'd make sure the press knew it was because Stevie had betrayed the band. It was 1981, and Fleetwood Mac was still trying to recover from the chaos of Tusk. Another scandal could wipe them out completely. Stevie suddenly had an impossible choice sitting right in front of her. She could hold her ground, drop The Dealer with Eddie's blazing guitar on it, and risk blowing up Fleetwood Mac forever. Or she could bury 6 hours of her best work in years just to keep the peace. She looked over at Eddie, and he saw it in her eyes, that mix of heartbreak and surrender. She was choosing survival over truth, fame over freedom. Stevie finally told Lindsey he'd won. Then she turned to Marcus and told him to destroy the master tape. Eddie tried to step in, saying they could find another way, but Stevie stopped him cold. It was done. She thanked Eddie, apologized for dragging him into her storm, and walked out of Studio 2 with Lindsey trailing behind her like a guard, making sure she didn't turn back. Eddie just stood there silent, the air still buzzing from what had just gone down. Then he slowly unplugged his guitar and walked out without saying a word. The drive back to his place in Coldwater Canyon felt unreal. His mind kept looping the whole night, the riff they'd made, Stevie's voice slicing through his guitar like lightning. He thought about telling Valerie everything, but how could he even begin? He'd just spent 6 hours alone in a studio with one of rock's most mysterious and captivating women, recording something incredible that would never see daylight. And he'd watched a legendary relationship crash and burn right in front of him. Valerie was already on edge about his long nights in the studio, the fans throwing themselves at him, and the groupies who somehow got their private number. This story, it would only make things worse. Eddie made a choice that would haunt him for years. He stayed quiet. When he got home, he told Valerie he'd been at 5150 working on fair warning demos, and she believed him without a second thought. Why wouldn't she? But what Eddie didn't know was that someone had already made a secret copy of that destroyed tape, and that hidden track would come back to bite years later in the worst way imaginable. Marcus Chen, the session engineer, broke every unspoken rule in the book that night. Before erasing the master tape, he quickly bounced a rough mix onto a cassette and slipped it into his jacket pocket. He told himself it was for archival purposes, convincing himself that something this powerful shouldn't vanish because of pride and drama. But deep down, he knew what he really had: gold. A secret collaboration between Eddie Van Halen and Stevie Nicks wasn't just music, it was power, leverage, money. Marcus hid that cassette inside a safety deposit box for 8 long years, never breathing a word about it. But in 1989, when Fleetwood Mac hit the road for their reunion tour, temptation got the best of him. He reached out to a music journalist named Rebecca Solis, hoping she'd help him auction the tape to high-end collectors who lived for this kind of buried scandal. Rebecca listened to the cassette once and instantly knew what she was hearing. Stevie's voice wrapped around Eddie's guitar like it was meant to be. But she also saw the fallout coming a mile away. She told Marcus straight up he was sitting on a bomb that could blow up multiple careers. Then she dropped another shocker, something Marcus didn't know at all. Valerie Bertinelli had filed for divorce from Eddie in 1988, citing infidelity. If this tape ever leaked, the tabloids would spin it into a steamy affair that never even happened. Marcus freaked out and shoved the cassette back into his vault, terrified of what he'd nearly unleashed. But Rebecca, being the rare journalist with a conscience, didn't just walk away. She called Stevie Nicks' management and told them exactly what she'd heard, that the lost tape still existed. Within 2 days, Stevie's lawyer reached out to Marcus with an offer he couldn't refuse: $50,000 cash and a legal agreement to keep his mouth shut forever about that session. Marcus took the deal. He needed the money badly. The cassette was destroyed again, this time in front of witnesses. and Marcus signed a strict non-disclosure agreement that would only expire 30 years later, or upon Stevie's death, whichever came first. And that's where the story supposedly ended. Eddie never found out that the tape survived. Lindsey never realized his threat had failed. Valerie never learned the truth, not because she didn't deserve to know, but because by then it was too late. Dragging it up would have only reopened old wounds. Still, the ripples from that night in March 1981 never really faded. 3 months later, Stevie dropped Belladonna, but the dealer was nowhere to be found. Instead, she filled the album with safer, radio-friendly hits. Critics loved it, but couldn't help noticing that Stevie seemed more guarded, like she was holding something back. Eddie, on the other hand, threw himself into fair warning like a man possessed. That album turned out darker, heavier, and more aggressive than anything Van Halen had ever done before. Tracks like Mean Street and Unchained carried a raw frustration that came from way deeper than just band drama. Some critics started whispering about trouble in Eddie's marriage, and they weren't completely wrong. The secret he kept from Valerie wasn't about cheating, but it built a wall between them, a quiet crack in their trust that grew with time. Meanwhile, Fleetwood Mac was slowly falling apart, too. Lindsey and Stevie could barely stand to be in the same room, and by 1987, Lindsey finally walked away for good. The truth behind why everything fell apart was messy, real messy. But those closest to the band always said it started back in that 1981 studio meltdown. That moment was the spark that quietly set the fuse for everything that came after. Eddie Van Halen never spoke publicly about that session again. Not for 38 years. There was only one person he finally opened up to, his son, Wolfgang. It was late 2019, during one of Eddie's cancer treatments. Wolfgang had asked him about the collaborations he dreamed of finishing but never did. Eddie, tired and frail from the meds, started telling him the story the day he recorded with Stevie Nicks. He talked about the riff they'd built together, how Stevie's voice had turned his guitar into something cinematic, mysterious, dangerous. He described the chaos that followed, Lindsey Buckingham's rage, the erasing of the tape, and that hollow feeling of watching something beautiful vanish because of someone else's fear and jealousy. Wolfgang asked why he never tried to rebuild that song to bring it back to life. Eddie just smiled weakly and said something that stuck deep with him. Some music is meant to stay in the room where it's born. That song belonged to Stevie, and when Lindsey killed it, I had to respect that it wasn't mine to resurrect. 2 weeks later, fate brought the memory back in a wild way. Stevie Nicks appeared on a Los Angeles radio show promoting a Fleetwood Mac documentary. The host casually asked about secret collaborations, expecting the usual names like Tom Petty or Don Henley. But Stevie's face suddenly went distant, her voice soft as she said, almost to herself, "I once recorded something with Eddie Van Halen that nobody will ever hear, and I think about it more than I should." The host tried to dig for more, but Stevie caught herself, laughed it off, and brushed it away like it was nothing. But Wolfgang heard that broadcast, and he knew it wasn't a joke. He could hear the truth buried in her tone. After Eddie passed away in October 2020, Wolfgang was flooded with messages and condolences from across the music world. But one stood out, a handwritten letter from Stevie Nicks herself. In it, she opened up about that secret 1981 session. She called it a moment of pure creative freedom, before fame, ego, and industry politics smothered it. She wrote that Eddie had been a total gentleman that day, never gossiping, never leaking details, never using their chaotic session for attention. Then she said something that broke Wolfgang's heart. Stevie called The Dealer the best song she'd never released. She said Eddie's guitar on it was some of the most haunting playing she'd ever heard, and she ended her letter with an apology that said it all. "I'm sorry we let fear win that day." Your father deserved to have that music exist in the world. Wolfgang thought long and hard about sharing that letter publicly, turning that lost collaboration into a part of Eddie's official legacy. But in the end, he chose silence. His dad had kept the secret all his life, and Wolfgang felt it was only right to do the same. To this day, no one knows if Marcus Chen's cassette still exists. If it does, it's hidden away, untouched, unplayed, and possibly forgotten. The exact words Lindsey said to Stevie in that control room, the ones that broke her, were buried with them forever. In the end, it didn't just fade away, it turned into a ghost story, a haunting what if that still lingers in the minds of everyone who knew it happened. Lindsey Buckingham's jealous need for control, while maybe understandable given his tangled history with Stevie, ended up robbing the world of what could have been one of the most iconic collaborations in rock history. And Eddie's choice to stay silent, to hide that moment from Valerie, might have come from kindness, but it still planted a tiny seed of dishonesty. Over time, that seed grew into distance, mistrust, and the slow crumble of what had once been a dream marriage. Secrets carry weight, real weight, even the small ones, even the ones we keep for what we think are the right reasons. That March afternoon in 1981 didn't just shift careers, it quietly changed lives forever. And almost no one knew it until now. If you love this deep dive into one of rock's most mysterious hidden moments, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more wild music stories and untold legends. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.